Former President Jimmy Carter had a big impact on the world, both while he was in office and, of course, when he returned to civilian life. Going to get a better perspective on his impact, we invited Georgia Southern University Assistant Professor Dr. Kimberly Martin Tecklenburg. Her focus political science and international studies. Doctor, we wanted to start first with that talk we were having. How did he get in office in the first place? Because he's not your typical president or presidential candidate.
No, he was a one-term governor of a southern state. He was not well known at the time, and he actually did a stint as the Democratic National Committee chair. And so he ended up going into the Democratic nomination process, not necessarily being well known, and he essentially outlasted his competition and narrowly won all of the delegates that he needed to get the Democratic nomination. So it was a very, sort of a big deal that he was able to get there in the first place.
As president, we'd say he had some challenges perhaps during his 4 years at that point. What would you say is the biggest legacy from the time he was actually in office, or what he had to deal with?
Right, so a lot of his presidency is really known for what overwhelmed it. So we know about inflation, we know about gas prices, Afghanistan, the hostages in Iran, but really when it comes down to his presidency, there's a lot of things that he put into motion that we didn't realize were actually good until after he left the presidency. Like most presidents, history sort of sees them in a better light than necessarily when they were in the office in the first place.
What kind of things are we talking about that people now know him for, really?
Right, so one of the things that he really focused on was human rights. So he was one that he wanted to make sure that he held accountable his allies and his adversaries for any human rights violations. He was the one who established the Department of Energy, which regulated a lot of suppliers. He was the one who accelerated stockpiling of oil. He was the one who started to put into motion all of the things that we know of today that really have pushed us more towards energy and like decreasing mileage with cars and like doing research towards alternative fuel sources. So at the time, of course, we saw gas prices going through the roof, but then not until after he left the presidency did we really realize that a lot of those policies he put in place are those that then decreased our foreign energy dependence at that time.
And the foreign side of things, of course, the Middle East peace accords that he had with Sadat and Begin at the time. Yeah. While, of course, no matter what, I don't know if we're going to ever get peace in the Middle East, he really was the first one to step up and focus on that.
He brought foreign leaders to Camp David, this little camp outside of Washington, D.C. He brought Israeli leaders, he brought Syria and Egypt together and was able to broker a peace deal that had taken years to get to that point. And I think that that's probably what he'll be seen as one of his biggest foreign policy accomplishments.
Is he now more well respected than perhaps when he was in office in those couple years after, when he was in some ways reviled?
I think that there's mixed opinions about what his presidency was like, but as it is with most politicians after their presidency, we really get a better picture. And I think we can look back now and really see where maybe he was judged a little bit harshly, and maybe some of the things he put into place were actually good for us in the long run.
Ronald Reagan, of course, considered one of the great presidents by many people. Did he switch a lot of Carter policies, or did he just continue some of them along with what he created?
Now, they had a very adversarial role, the two of them did, and he did change a lot of the things that that Carter did. But really, when we talk about things like the Iran hostages, this was sort of a joint endeavor from both administrations to get the hostages freed. And I think in the end, they ended up sort of having to work together.
So interesting, the first president probably that had more impact outside of the White House, because previously you had Nixon, you had Ford, who kind of disappeared after their times. Now you had somebody who wanted to be in the spotlight for the human rights especially.
Yes, absolutely. And he's someone who, when you look at the presidency, when you look at him as a president, he came in, we had Vietnam, we had Watergate, and people were really looking for an honest person, someone who led by their faith, who was very religious, who really had faith in science and technology and was, progressive. And he was really those things, and he embodied those things from start to end. And I think that's what's great about him.
Does Jimmy Carter get elected today, in today's politics?
I think he was a little bit more subtle than some of our politicians are today. So I'm not sure that that would be the case. But there are a lot of things that you can draw comparisons.
And we're here in Georgia too. The impact that he had on bringing Georgia into the political forefront has got to be something amazing.
Yeah, absolutely, because as I mentioned before, he was coming from a small southern state, a one-term governor. People hadn't really considered someone, this political outsider, to be a viable candidate for presidency. And so people focused more on Georgia after he became president.
Pretty amazing. He's Georgia's own son, and we have a lot of tribute to him today,
That's
especially.
right.
So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you giving us some sense of the political legacy, which is complicated at best.
It is complicated, yes.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Thanks.
much.